If you've ever been curious about our logo or kind of wanted to make your own brand or project that sort of needed an icon to represent it, this video is going to be for you. Today I'm going to go over kind of how we got our logo, what we had before, and sort of the design decisions that we ended up making along the way, as well as maybe a few mistakes that sort of led us to it. So for reference, this is our current logo that we're probably going to be sticking with for the foreseeable future. And I am Fit of Femboy Fitness. This is the logo for our company, Femboy Fitness, where our mission is, as you know, to help everyone achieve their health and aesthetic goals and feel comfortable in the process. And so naturally, we wanted to kind of represent that with like these sort of two Fs and sort of different wing patterns that I think kind of nicely represent that. But we didn't always have this. Previously, we had this for multiple years. This is just something that I ended up throwing together in Canva in like an afternoon, and then stuck with for like 3 years. Wasn't super happy with it. Wasn't anything crazy, but kind of worked. Sort of got the gist, there. And the other thing I would do is I would use images of a Stolfo to kind of represent me. That was sort of the first thing I did. Now, of course, this is an existing character, so there are kind of copyright issues. This is just for reference, a internal document that we have sort of use this logo, and we would kind of just do something like this, kind of put everything together like that. And that sort of worked for the longest time, but at some point I was like, okay, I don't know how big we can get before using an established character gets you a cease and desist. So naturally, eventually had to kind of make sure we went away from that before we got too into the weeds on it. So before the design process for the new logo even began, there are a couple things that we had sort of figured out that I knew I wanted to use. So I had a rough idea when I was going to a designer of like different fonts and kind of primary colors that we sort of liked and had used in the past for designs to probably include in some fashion, or at least have work in a color palette with the existing logo. That being, the tan, you can kind of see the background here, pinks, dark reds, and whites. All of those we found and kind of worked really well together in our internal documents that use this. And our goal was basically that we wanted to be sure to not use Astolfo for, again, copyright reasons. And I also wanted to be sure that the end design of the logo was definitely recognizable as Femboy Fitness. You wouldn't, mistake it as anything else, but also a little bit subtle publicly. I didn't want to do just an image of like a popular femboy or just like Femboy Fitness as text. Because I wanted to be sure that, especially for people that are concerned they live in homophobic areas, that they aren't feeling like they're going to be going outside with, something from our brand that's then going to, kind of out them if that's not, this thing they're comfortable with. So wanted to be a little bit subtle. And I also thought I wanted it to sort of represent both femme and masculine elements in some ways. For the kind of end product, it's femboy, and a lot of people have varying different ideas on how feminine or masculine they kind of want to look. So we wanted it to represent all of those and feel, very accommodating. I ended up going with the designer of this. This is my favorite toothpaste brand, and I really liked kind of their packaging. Opening this up for the first time felt really cool. So this is the designer here that I ended up working with for this process. The first thing, I just kind of sent them over, hey, I have a brand called Femboy Fitness. I'm trying to figure out a new logo. I know I don't want to include the full name. And they're like, okay, let me send you a couple rough ideas. And they sent me these over. And very quickly you can see these include people. And we ended up just completely not doing that. At all, but just kind of they had the color schemes, and they're kind of thinking what else might work with it. This I felt like, okay, this is like very flat. There's not really any depth to this color scheme. This is like, definitely gives more of a gamer vibe that kind of sort of fits with what a lot of people in the demographic I think would be used to in terms of logos they'd see for games or things like that. And I still really like the color scheme of this, especially the like sort of deep blue shadows of a figure. I actually really liked this. We kind of, as you know, ended up going away from that direction in the end, but I actually really like this. So I was like, okay, like these two color schemes on the right, we like those more. Maybe we can see some different ideas and do like subtle text to kind of see what we can do with that. And this is what they came back with. It's again almost more, you know, kind of like a neon lights thing going on here. It was pretty cool. And sort of a little bit of like an inverse of the color scheme for this person here, I think. That was okay. So we were kind of leaning a little bit more towards this. I liked the idea of a lighter color scheme, but I felt like that this just made the text a bit too dark, and then the graphics, it kind of felt a little clunky to me. So kind of went around that, and I was like, okay, the idea of like an F and an F, I think definitely works a lot better than a person. It's a lot easier to communicate that, have people know what the logo is for, but also still be, you know, very generic, very kind of subtle. So we ended up going, okay, let's do FF and do a couple different design ideas from that there. Maybe we can make it that the F's like distinct and somehow in that way represent both sort of feminine and masc energy a bit. And then we kind of got these three. So the other thing that I thought would maybe make sense is basically to represent like masc and femme energy, to have like a hexagon or something almost reminiscent of like a plate, you know, just a 45-pound, like some kind of weight in the background, and then having, you know, the F's in front as a bit of a softer design. You can sort of see they kind of went in a couple different directions with that, using the darker color scheme. We really didn't like this one. And this one, although I think the color scheme and background are kind of cool, really gives Mr. Beast, you know, I don't think we're going to be giving anyone $1 million in YouTube videos anytime soon. But that's kind of what this color scheme reminds me of. But we actually really liked how this looked, with the F's kind of facing away from each other. It's vaguely reminiscent of FaZe Clan, for like Call of Duty and gaming, especially with this one, I think. But we actually kind of really liked that idea, especially how soft it was. And so as we were kind of talking internally with the team, someone had the idea of, hey, well, what if the F's were like wings? So I was like, okay, that's a really cool idea. Let's see what we can do with that. And we ended up getting to this next. Again, still keeping that sort of hexagon. The idea of maybe if it's like, if there's some metallic stuff in the background, it'll be sort of like you know, a barbell. Maybe we can have like metallic and also like the sort of pink and blue that kind of, you know, are typically used as like boy versus girl colors. And sort of you can see now we're actually getting to the end shape that we have, but this is very clearly not it. So we didn't really like this. Like the shape was kind of cool, but a lot of people actually couldn't tell it was two F's with how big this was. It was a little bit hard to distinguish that. The metal, we weren't a big fan of that, so we were like, okay, let's probably keep it more of like a flat color, but you know, see if we can modify that a little bit. And we ended up getting to this rough shape. Another thing that we sort of struggle with a lot is actually like the background. As you can kind of see from, you know, the design document I had earlier for our internal assets, we had, you know, just sort of random shapes and different design colors there. And designer sort of was like, well, maybe they can do something like that. And yeah, I think this has actually been one of the trickiest parts for us in the design process, is figuring out what are we going to do in the background. But you can really see like now the foreground, the actual logo icon itself really coming together. This is very similar to what we have now, but sort of it felt a little bit too light. We ended up thinking, okay, like this is kind of cool. Maybe the main wing is more of the red and the blue instead of kind of the outermost portions. And yeah, this hexagon just really not doing it for us. We'd have to kind of switch that up a little bit for it to work. you know, maybe the blue is kind of, you know, fem boy, maybe getting enough of that identity on its own. And we went kind of another round on that and ended up getting this. So again, kind of reusing, this is a color shifted version of the gamer background for the Mr. Beast looking logo version. And you can see now we're getting very close. You know, we're still not really sure what we're doing in the background. That's kind of very hard. We still have the hexagon here, and we're just like vaguely not really sure what to do there. But the actual F design itself, and like just this sort of little thing at the bottom here, inverting the color to really more dominantly show, okay, this is the femme, this is the boy. I think this is, you're like, okay, this is actually really good. The two Fs look good, everything else is bad. Maybe we can just kind of narrow it down on that and then figure stuff out later. And from there, we ended up, you know, this is sort of the dark variation that we got then with the background pattern. We were like, okay, yeah, this gives Mr. Beast, this gives Chuck E. Cheese. Maybe we just don't do this kind of thing in the background and figure something else out. And then especially when it ended up being outlined, I think it ended up that ended up being how we really got to the current logo. Now, what's also really cool, I want to kind of shout out the designer on this, is that all of these images that they were doing are vector graphs. So one of the cool things about our logo too is that with the files that I have, I can basically convert it to any size I need it to be. A vector graph is more like a mathematical formula, that it's like this is not a pixelated shape of a feather F thing. You know, this is a mathematical formula of what this curve looks like. There's just all kinds of little mathematical formulas like that. So you can make logo as small as you want, or you can make it big enough to put on a billboard and then just kind of convert it to a file of that size. Very fun to be able to have that. Big shout out to the designer for having that. That was really nice. I think it's helped for some niche situations for us so far. But that ended up being how we got our current logo. You can kind of see if we just outline it in black, we have a version for that. There's also one that's not, but I think we normally end up, I think having a solid outline ends up being really nice for kind of making all the colors pop. And that's how we got our current logo.